Are we doing okay so far?
Man, unbelievable. This is really something unlike anything I have ever experienced in my life. Thank you so much for thinking of me, man. Really, it's a little overwhelming almost, and incredibly humbling. It's just, I don't even know what to say. Thank you. Thanks to everybody.
What's the experience of hearing people who you don't really know, who are different generations and different experiences in life, play your compositions? You've heard your music played before a lot, but how is this?
Well, it's great. You kind of picked, kind of all my favorite guys to do this too. I'm of course a big fan of everybody that's playing, and to know the way that they play their own music, and then and you too, and to hear your take on this stuff, it's just such an honor. It's great. I have to say, for me, of course I play, as everybody knows, millions of gigs, so it's kind of weird to go to a gig and not play. And yet at the same time, while you guys are playing, I'm playing. It's not like I can go, oh yeah, that's nice. I'm going like B flat F, dude. I'm like, because some of these tunes, are tunes that I, still am, involved in playing. So, and at the same time, it's fascinating for me, especially on a kind of guitar level, to hear what everybody does, how everybody would negotiate this part of that tune and everything. So it's just really cool. So thank you.
We won't take the guitar out of your hand if you want to jump on stage. That's another story.
You all got it. You got it tonight.
So I want to ask you a few questions that I've been pondering most of my life. I said somewhere, I think that I feel like you're a lot older than me because you made such an imprint on the music scene at such a young age, but actually we're close to the same age. And we were in Boston close to the same time. And that was a very special time, the early 70s and mid-70s in Boston, with Bill Frisell there, Scofield, Randy Ruse, Mike Stern. Something was happening. Something changed with the guitar, and you were an enormous part of that. Reflect on that a little bit. There was a magical time, I feel.
Well, I think, there was kind of a moment there where, the music had been evolving in all the ways that those of us follow this general area of music know about. And the guitar played a part in it, certainly, under the auspices of all the great players that we all love. And at the same time, there was kind of a subgroup of music that really had not been that addressed harmonically, even just in terms of the vibe. Much of the music that is getting played here tonight would be kind of in that general area that guitar had not really been an active participant in that much kind of prior to that. And a lot of that had to do with just, first of all, the nature of the instrument, which has a kind of set of unique issues, and also harmony, as it described by, Herbie Hancock and, that generation of musicians, in terms of how you would address that on the guitar, was an area that was really fertile for investigation. And, I would say there was another thing too, which is that, by the time, let's say that I was really starting to write my own stuff and having my first band with Jaco that was mentioned before and everything, one thing had already happened that it's kind of funny now. I saw the guy in the paper say fusion about me, which was weird because to me, I was like a complete reactionary to that, to the idea of playing kind of rock and roll style one chord thing, because that was really the function of the guitar as it sort of applied to a lot of that music. And I was like, completely like, that was what I did not want to do. And I mean, with time and distance, things, blur together or whatever. But I think that the idea of playing with a lot of dynamics within phrases, having a looser kind of rhythm section approach as opposed to like backbeats and that sort of thing, and also to me the idea of sort of having a narrative expositional approach to improvising were all things that were really worth exploring, and kind of then manifested itself in a lot of different ways through a lot of different players. But there was a sense of possibility then that was very unique, and I just feel very lucky when I'm grouped in with a lot of those musicians that you talk about.
Well, the possibilities, I think, is a great word, because I feel a kindred spirit to you and some of the people we're talking about, in the sense that we were at sort of the beginning of this moment, which was not new, but it was bigger, where so many different kinds of music were coming together, and we could somehow get to know them in our playing in a way that started to bust up the notion of genre. And I think you were kind of one of the flagship guitar players to just do away with that notion and just bring so many different threads of music together.
Well, I've always felt non-aligned. I don't really feel, even now, I don't necessarily feel I'm this or I'm that, or I'm in this group or this category or whatever. And in fact, to a degree, that's been a little bit of a problem for me. Not a bad problem, but an issue that, I've never been a good one-sentence person, it's really good when somebody can just go, well, so-and-so is that. And I think that my impulse, and I bet this is true of most of the listeners here, and certainly almost all of the players here, is the issue of honesty and authenticity in the sense of really reflecting what you love as a musician is the one kind of unifying characteristic that sort of falls across the board when I think about all my favorite musicians. And that was happening, already in the music world. I mean, the generation that would be the one sort of above me as I am to a lot of the guys here would be the Gary Burton, Jack DeJohnette, Dave Holland generation, Keith Jarrett, and to me that generation remains really kind of a standard in a lot of ways in terms of many of the things I just talked about, but also the idea of really honestly talking about what you love in music. And to me, that it remains the thing for me, is to try to really explain and offer the things about music that really matter to me. In certainly in the playing, but this concert tonight is a little bit of a it kind of goes together with something else that's going on right now, which is this book that is just about to come out, where finally, really after years and years and years, I really focused on trying to put together the 150 or so tunes that are the tunes you could do a gig like this playing, but with really the right chords and really right. And in the process of putting that together, I was surprised to understand or find, at least for me, that what's on the page is at least as much about what I'm talking about as, phrasing or sound or any of the other stuff. And, the whole thing of writing music kind of came as a necessity for me as an improviser, because there was a way I wanted to play that I was not able to do playing a Wayne Shorter tune or playing on a blues or playing on a standard. And when I wrote kind of the first tune and realized that if I write this stuff down and hand it to the bass player, he's going to play that, it was like, yeah. and then I could sort of play, the way I wanted to play, and that began this ongoing process, which I still feel very much on the road of trying to create environments for improvising musicians and for myself that allows that to happen. With this whole idea of sort of a non-aligned view of what it all is.
Well, let's dig a little deeper into Pat Metheny, the composer. One of the things I experienced last night, we played this music in Boston with a number of the players tonight, and it was really interesting because by the end of it, I think you'll all feel this tonight, I had a certain sense of gravity to the whole body of work that I'd heard. And one of the things that came to mind as I was listening to it is there's a deep sense of beauty and joy in your music. That's kind of unusual, I think. Do you feel that I'm accurate in that, or is this conscious to you? Your melodies are absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. And you're a real melody person. Talk a little bit about that process for yourself, and also that sense of, there's a positive feeling to a lot of this music, and man, I don't need to tell you, that's in short supply everywhere.
You know, I have a very limited capacity, like I think everybody that's a musician does, of being objective about my own thing. And honestly, I admire people who have that kind of objectivity. Also, from the input side, I know musicians who can like see a beautiful sunset and then say, okay, I'm going to write a composition about that. And that is the antithesis for me of any approach that I've ever taken to music, and I envy people like that, because for me, music is intrinsically complete, in the sense that when I hear a sound or even if I get one note, mostly I write at the piano, or if I get some kind of an idea, it's sort of like my universe collapses into what that idea is. And really, it's just a matter of unfolding what that idea is. And it all happens sort of within the realm of music for me. And, that then is often followed by, making a recording of that tune. And then there is a moment where, I'm mixing the record or whatever, and I put it in the CD player or whatever it is, now, whatever, however you're going to do it. And usually I like to drive around, because then that part of my brain is disconnected. And then I kind of go around a corner and I see a sunset or whatever, and I go, well, yeah, this, I can see why people write those letters about their wallpaper turning purple and stuff, But it's only for that second that I get it, and then I'm back to, okay, the bass is too loud, or whatever it is. I mean, my point is that I'm not really the person who can hear it that way. I'm happy to hear that, though. But the melody thing is another thing that is, in fact, I think, a little bit more tangible. It is the X factor to me in music. We can talk about chord substitution and break things down, and harmonic voicings and rhythmic, displacements and modulations and all that, and hundreds and thousands of books are written about this all the time. Those areas are modes and all that. Melody is the thing you can't even find a book about that, and it's really the most elusive element in things. And also, when I, again, look across the spectrum of the musicians who have affected me the most, that component is absolutely unifying. And I think that, sometimes when I say melody or people say melody, I think, there is a kind of almost cliche version of what that is. I mean, to me, Derek Bailey was incredibly melodic. Mm-hmm. You can, if you listen the right way, you can knock a bunch of trash cans down a flight of stairs and hear the melody in that. There's melody in moments that requires a certain kind of awareness, I think, of a melodic way of being, in sound. And that has always been fascinating to me, and absolutely the most difficult part of it. In the forward to this book, there's a great Jack Lemmon line everybody knows, which is, dying is easy, comedy is hard. And I've always thought dying is easy, melody is hard. That's sort of the musical version of it. And I think that for me, as an improviser, because I was around Gary Burton and Steve Swallow and Mick Goodrick, who was of that era, and then my major guitar influences, of course, Wes Montgomery being hands down the main one, but also Jim Hall and Kenny Burrell. The melodic component of what they offered was central. And so that part of it, from a composition standpoint, is something that I have very high standards for myself, because also there's a practical side of that. I tour a lot, and if I write a tune, I'm going to have to play it like 400 times. So whenever I write something, I sit there, and my wife is here, she'll vouch for this. I play it over and over and over and over again for days at a time to make sure, number one, that it's at that level, but also that I'm going to be able to play it 400 times and find that thing in it and be able to pound on it night after night after night, the way that I think that all the tunes that we all love, you can just, beat them up and they'll still retain their core. That thing is a very important thing for me that I've always tried to work on.
That's really interesting. So, well,
Thanks, man.
Let's talk about something else that is personally important to me, because at a certain point, I decided I wanted to write longer jazz compositions. I wanted to have an episodic narrative content to what I was doing. And you were onto that idea early on. And some of I have to say, for me, the way up is, sort of a high bar for extended composition in jazz. So let's talk a little bit about that. How did you get motivated to do that, and how what's your process for that? I know it's closely aligned with working with Lyle Mays, but
well, I think that the idea of sort of really exploring what can a small group be was a pretty important one for me at the time that I started my own band. It seemed to me that there were many things that were suddenly possible in the environment of a relatively limited group of people on stage that had a lot to do with the technology that was possible. And I've obviously never had any trepidation about jumping right in there with what could be. And synths in general were a pretty huge thing for me, and sort of kind of intersected almost exactly chronologically with my development as a band leader and so forth. And also, I think that one thing that I've always been interested in and is trying to find some territory where I didn't quite know what it was. And that's still, I'm still happiest when I really don't know what I'm doing. I'll do almost anything to get to that spot. And so that area is, like you said, it's one that has not been explored that much in a small group setting. A lot of what emerged kind of in the early days of my band when we started had to do with the possibilities of what sequencers, and the synclavier was a huge thing for me. That sort of, it's almost funny now because what's in your iPhone is probably 10,000 times more powerful than what the synclavier was at the time. But I do think there is a certain kind of energy and almost a certain kind of ether that's emitted when a musician is confronted with a set of new possibilities. Not just for that musician, but it's like, wow, nobody's ever really faced this before. And that was very inspiring for me, and it very naturally led to the kinds of things that, my band, had continued to do over the years, and has always kind of been a destination for me. Also records like Secret Story, or even the Orchestrion record, as wacky as that was, kind of under the hood of that was all about, like, okay, it's not just a tune, It's what else is it? And yet at the same time, as much as I have been interested in extended, expanded things, one thing that I have found is that if the core of it is not sort of beat upable in the way that I described before, it doesn't matter that much. Like the central issues have to really be there for that to work. In a way, it's almost easier to write a big, long, extended thing than it is to write, like, Farmers Trust or something like that. It's a funny thing because I've done, really massive things and then little things that kind of wind up being more than the bigger things sometimes. And maybe that's a little later in life lesson thing that is coming to be a little more known for me. But again, the common element for me is to try to figure out things that I don't know the answer to. That's usually a good way to get in there somehow.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it's 19, whatever it is, 77, 78. You've done Bright Size Life. Surely you must have felt that you could have just played with a trio or a quartet and had a pretty good career at that point and just done that. But you start the Pat Metheny Group. And I remember going to the jazz workshop and I was like, wow, what's going on here? I didn't expect this. And I think it was that same week that Bill was there. And you're a young man at that point. What was the process in your mind? Something must have gone, this is great, and I know I can do this, and I'm playing with Jaco and Bob Moses, and it doesn't get any better, but there's something more I need out of life. Along with this, not in place of this. I want it all.
For me, looking back on it now, I was pretty young actually, and it wasn't in a bad way, but it kind of just unfolded that way, and I had, like you said, had made a couple records and started to kind of like win polls and stuff, and also right at that moment, that was still kind of the tail end of around the scene. One chord rock and roll in our general zone. What I was interested in was very different than that, which ended up being kind of a good thing. I mean, it felt, I think, to people at the time like it was something that was, in fact, fresh or whatever you want to call it, relative to what was going on. And even with that said, I don't think anybody expected what happened, which is that, era became kind of a thing, it kind of still is going on in a way that to a level that if I had never done anything in my entire life except stand on the bandstand with Gary Burton and play Walter L. once, I would have been fine. That was already so far beyond my wildest dream. And then that I got to play in his band for 3 years was unbelievable. And then suddenly, looking around the sideman possibilities right at that moment, there weren't really a lot of things that were in the zone that I was interested in. I mean, John Abercrombie was playing with Jack DeJohnette. That was a great guitar gig. I did get a chance to play with Stan Getz, which I regret to this day that I didn't do for a year. I should have done that, but there was this thing kind of happening, and I was also pretty, on a mission from God in a way, in terms as the Blues Brothers. I had an idea, a sense of music that was, every gig, even if there were two people there, we'd play 3.5 hours, and it was that way every night, everywhere in the country and then in the world, And it's still that way. The guys that come to the gigs, I'll play 3 hours every night, and that ends up being a thing. And that's also just the way I hear it. That's kind of the vibe of it. So, that had a certain something that then, it's still, like I said, it's still kind of going on like that. And I feel unbelievably fortunate about everything that's happened. It was very unexpected, though.
Let's use the word that has come to mean almost nothing, Americana. One of the great contributions, whether it was conscious or not, that you brought that's become, I think, very widespread, was to say you could play a triad. It doesn't have to be a major seventh. I can bring in, I'm expostulating here a little bit, but I grew up in the Midwest. I can bring that feeling of what that music is into the jazz realm, and that's me. And I think the sense of flavor of folk and country and such that is in a lot of your compositions is big part of what you are. Am I right?
Well, I thank you. That's a real compliment. I appreciate that. For me, again, looking at my heroes, there's a certain honesty, authenticity in each case about them really describing the lives that they've led. And for me, I kind of realized pretty early on, I'm from a, farm town basically in Missouri. I'm not from New York. I'm not this, I'm not that. I am kind of what I am. And, I could say it was conscious to the degree that you described it very well. I really love triads, and it was very difficult for me to get people to play just those 3 notes. And I was, guys would start, I'm thinking, no, it's really just the triad. And as you would remember, that was almost like avant-garde at the time,
Looked down upon even,
well,
I would say.
yeah, and also it's really hard to do. And that's an interesting thing, too, to really kind of sort of reduce the harmonic palette to this other zone where it's kind of more like the bass note is the moving element in it, but the upper stuff kind of stays the same. That was an area that, especially in the rhythmic zone, that was also interesting to me, which kind of came from, sitting around the campfire-y kind of stuff. I mean, which had not been explored really at all, and that's kind of one of the best things guitar can do is that.
Well, that's the thing is that at that point, see, a triad, the guitar loves a triad. The piano likes a triad. The guitar loves a triad. And I think that one of the things that started with you and Bill and John was this kind of explosion of guitar-centric jazz in a new way. Our models before that were Herb Ellis and Jim Hall, and people whose lives and whose experience and whose way of playing were very different than ours. And this sense of the guitar all of a sudden occupying this huge space in jazz really, as Bill said, changed everything. So.
Well, you guys tonight are just, everybody up here is like, continuing that research, and meant to be part of all of this. Whenever I hear my name kind of mentioned along with everybody else, I'm just, really honored to be in that community, and everything tonight I was saying to my wife, it just makes me want to go home and practice. So that's, that's great, right? That's what should happen.
Yeah. See how we're doing. Well, I think that's a great place. Unfortunately, much as I would like to talk all night, I think that's a good place to end it. And I just want to say again how much it means to us that you came down to see this. And I just think it's just feels like a nice love fest all the way around.
And it's a thrill for me. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming too. Thank you, Joel. So nice, man.